Sure. Well, first of all, it was a complete surprise. Was not expecting that. And yeah, I'm familiar with how one goes about nominating for Star Wars. I'm familiar with, who is involved in the decision making. But the thing is, I actually have no idea who nominated me to this day.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to You Should Hear This, a podcast for the Everyday Association Professional. I'm Nick Estrada, your host. Each year, ISAE, like many associations, recognizes the best of our membership through awards. Our awards are known as STAR, or the Society's top award of recognition. In these categories, we recognize both associations and individuals for their innovation, contributions, and impact on the association industry. Today, we get a chance to chat with one of our very own individual award winners to learn more about what they've done, but even more on why what they've done is important and how it paves a path for future involvement for others. Our guest today is Erica Poff, CAE, PMP, IOM, Vice President of Nonprofit Effectiveness with Talbott Talent. With more than a decade of experience, Erica has a proven track record of strengthening associations. Her areas of expertise include strategic planning, business development, credentialing, government relations, and advocacy, partnership development, volunteer recruitment, and management training and project management. Having spent her career with local, national, and international nonprofits, Erica is passionate about helping mission-driven organizations succeed in meeting the needs of their members and enriching their communities. Welcome, Erica. We're glad to have you here with us today.
Hi, Nick. Thank you so much for having me. This is really cool.
Yeah, it's a fun way to get to know more, right, about our current members.
Yeah, and I'll say this is the first time I listen to podcasts all the time, but to actually be part of one, this is pretty cool. So thank you so much for having me.
Remember us when you become a famous guest on podcasts.
No, don't worry. I'll never be too big for you guys. I promise. Just kidding. But no, really. As you'll probably see through my questions, I'm a pretty big dedicated ISAEer. So it's my pleasure.
We love that. So just to get us started, tell us a little bit more about your journey into the association world and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I think like most association people, association professionals, my journey was by no means linear or even really planned. At least that's what whenever I talk to others with this line of questioning, that's what comes up. But, as I have talked to others, in our line of work, I think I've discovered that my path might be even a little bit more different or off the beaten path. So I actually started out in international development. I went to school, got my bachelor's and master's in political science, particularly interested in international economics and economic development. So when I finished my master's, I went to Ohio University, I moved to Washington, DC, and I got a job, which at the time I would say was probably my dream job, with an amazing organization called the Center for International Private Enterprise, or CIPE for short. It's a bit of a mouthful otherwise. And they are a large nonprofit organization that works with civil society organizations in developing countries, specifically around issues of promoting entrepreneurism and public policy advocacy and those types of things. I think probably one thing I should mention is during my time in college, I developed a regional expertise in sub-Saharan Africa. So I was on their Africa team at this organization called CIPE, and I was now working in Eastern and Western Africa with civil society organizations. But here's a kicker. It wasn't just any type of civil society organization. It was professional and trade associations and chambers of commerce. So that was my real introduction to associations. And as I continued to work with them more, and I did grow, I had a few different roles at the organization over the years, I became a lot more interested in kind of the institutions of what, an association is. Like, what does it represent? Especially working in countries that were very young democracies or questionable democracies, if you will. The concept of representation is either very new or very weak. And so associations were really critical in filling that role. There were a lot of groups in these societies that otherwise wouldn't have a voice, whether it be from, trying to reduce barriers to starting a business to, trying to, reduce corruption across the gamut. And so for me, my understanding of associations was as much like it was a microcosm of democracy. It was really critical to the livelihoods of a lot of individuals. And then as I started realizing that, wow, and there's a whole lot of associations here in America, maybe not in some cases fulfilling that, really critical role of representation, but, doing, a whole lot of other types of services and benefits. I decided, okay, so I have this kind of global regional expertise in Africa, but I think I'd like to develop out my technical expertise in and around associations. And so I went to IOM, the Institute for Organization Management, through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. From there, and this is where it kind of dovetails when I talk about, okay, and then I went into an association instead of just working with associations. I went into the dovetail part is I was actually kind of reaching a point where my husband and I were ready to leave DC and come back to the Midwest. So it was both a slight career shift as well as a geographic change, but doing so allowed me then to really get in the business of the association. So I actually worked with a credentialing group for several years and learned a lot more about membership and continued to grow my skill set. And then now here I am at Talbott Talent today, where I, in my role, get to work with a lot of executives and board members of associations, a lot of different types of groups, and help support them in everything from their governments. We have primarily worked with them with their talent, so volunteer and paid talent, but improving their governance, providing a lot of different services to help these associations through their volunteer and paid talent to better achieve their missions. And so that can take a lot of different forms, but a lot of what we do is executive recruitment, and we do hiring services, and we do a lot of transition services like onboarding. We do new member board training, succession planning and transition planning. And so that's my journey. Again, by no means linear, by no means planned, but that's how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, and I think we hear that kind of non-linear path pretty consistently. You mentioned that. I think many of us have that similar kind of flow for how we got to where we are. I think it's interesting that you brought up the kind of the impact of associations, and I think sometimes we downplay that, right? We think, oh, this is just an association for X, right? Insert the topic or the industry or whatever that means. And even if we're not addressing some of the major issues that your group was maybe hitting on, right? Those are still very important components for what our members are doing, right? That may be their livelihood, even if it's not burgeoning democracies, in sub-Saharan Africa. But here, right, maybe for them, that feels really important. And I think that is important for all of us to recognize the impact that the work that we do in associations means, both on the local scale and at the larger scale for folks, as we look at whether it's a statewide association or it's a national or international group.
I would say, if I could just share a perspective on that. So
Absolutely.
We have so of course we have the three branches of government, and then you also have media, and I believe that's been called like the fifth estate, and so if we have these other, when we think of the important players in what makes our society what it is, you can't downplay the role of civil society organizations like associations, because the ability for lawmakers to really have any type of expertise or insight to the things that they're passing laws on require associations like us to come and advise, whether it be on a profession, an area of trade, understanding those impacts. A lot of that research, a lot of that information comes from associations. How this is talked about in the news and highlighted, that's a role that associations play. And so, I think it's, everyone in the association sphere jokes like, there's an association for everything. And there's a reason for that. And it's because we all are kind of working together from, how our society is constructed and the laws are made and how they're, in the inputs that go into them, but then also how people are held accountable, and then how businesses and economies develop. And so, we're part of a greater ecosystem, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, not to harp on the pandemic by any means, but I think that showed the power and the need for associations, really more so than a lot of things I think in our lifetime so far. I think it was really just a great opportunity to showcase who we are and what we can do to support members.
For sure.
You have a very interesting title. I like, you're not just like the vice president of nonprofit, account manager, or, whatever, right, that it could be. Or just nonprofit associations. I think as we look at that, right, like there's a lot of ways that you all could have probably written your title. And I think the vice president of nonprofit effectiveness is a very interesting word choice. So I'm curious if you could just share a little bit more about your specific role, what it is that you do, and kind of how that impacts associations, especially as a supplier member.
Sure. Okay. So, and there was a lot of discussion internally, like amongst our staff, when we came to this point of like, how is it we want to communicate our respective roles with Talbott Talent. And I think what you find is pretty much everyone, with exception of our president. I mean, she's president, right? But the rest of us, we wanted it to be more focused on what it is you can expect in terms of what it is we deliver or what it is we can contribute, as opposed to just like, a title or, the what it is that we do. So my title is reflective of the nature of the work that I am doing with our clients in the nonprofit sector, and the majority of them are associations, in terms of working with them to develop solutions that will help them to meet their missions. This was my first time working outside of an association or nonprofit, although I'm still working with them, hence, where, I'm considered a supplier member. So it was my first time not working in an environment, where I wasn't working directly on a mission or trying to work towards a specific goal. What we do is more indirect, but nonetheless really crucial is, we're helping through like giving the inputs, the talent, and the empowerment that they need, that they don't necessarily have internally amongst their paid staff or other types of volunteers or resources, and that in turn empowers them to meet their missions. And so this also plays on my history of nonprofit association expertise and how I am bringing that, as well as the best practices of our company, to this this approach of we are providing that expertise and talent support to help others achieve what they're trying to do with their organizations. There's a few different parts to that question, so I know I probably missed something.
No,
okay.
I think that totally hits it, and I think I appreciate the help them meet their mission. I think that when we think about suppliers or vendors in the association space, I think that's what they're always there for, right? They are there to help make my organization more effective, more successful, meet whatever metrics we're trying to meet in a better or easier way. And I think that means I like that title because I think it's very clear about what you're trying to achieve. And I like the phrasing you use there, right? It was important for you all to recognize what you can impact or bring to the table versus just a title, right? I always say in the association world, titles mean nothing. I mean, they do, right? They mean something, but at the same time, I think they only mean something if you've done like what you've done, which is you've really thought about what that means. It's not just, it's a director, it's a vice president of an area, right? But it needs to actually mean something. And I think that's very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
You just mentioned that this is your first role, not on the association side. And I'm curious, what got you interested in serving on the supplier or the vendor side of things?
So I will say it wasn't exactly an intentional choice where, I'm leaving I'll say the direct impact on mission type work, in the associations or in the nonprofits, and I want to be a supplier. It was just more of a bit of a shift in terms of, where I was in my life at the time and where I, wanted to kind of take my career. I knew I wanted, so this was, we're a few months into the pandemic in 2020, and what better time than to change than in the middle of a global pandemic, it's, I say that somewhat facetiously, but at the same time, it's like, there's opportunity in chaos and uncertainty. And so, maybe shaking things up in a time when things are shaken up is the way to go. And so I'd been thinking for a long time about wanting to go into consulting, just because in my various roles in associations, I had worked with a lot of subject matter experts and I worked with a lot of consultants who were able to bring those things to the table that we wouldn't necessarily have internally in terms of additional capacity or knowledge or expertise. And I've, over the course of my career to this point, I always really admired and looked up to those consultants because their role is a bit narrow and it's very specific, but it's something that is always really important and critical to whatever it is, we were doing in a project or, with a member or something like that. And I just thought it was really cool that they get to work and interact with a bunch of other associations and they get all this exposure and experience in terms of what works, what doesn't. And that really, I think, works with how my brain works. And so I was like, I've always kind of thought about this consulting thing. Maybe now's the time. Let's go for it. And that was a bit of a challenge because, the thing about, kind of going it, on as something like a consultant is there's a whole lot of business parts to it that have nothing to do with the actual work that you're doing with associations. And I figured out pretty quickly that, at least at this point in my life, I'm not interested in all of that background stuff. Like I got into, I applied for, like my business license and got the EIN tax number and all that. And I said, I really just want to work with clients. And, but I kind of committed to this. But at that time, as I'm just starting out, I'm now reaching out to my immediate network, and one of the very first people I reached out to was Leah York. Leah York is the president of Talbott Talent. Thus, she is my boss. And I had met her actually at ISAE's annual conference in 2019 at the Indiana night that was hosted by ISAE. So that was definitely, an ISAE connection. And then, I'm thinking about like, how I actually want to go out about this, how do I get clients? She's one of the first people I reached out to, and she very quickly invited me to lunch, and over a conversation said, why don't you come consult with me? We have a lot of this kind of work that, and then that's how I, very quickly was able to, offload those consulting business side of the responsibilities, and then come into, it's a small woman run business, but really capitalizing on my expertise and allowing me to explore these areas of working with different types of clients, but, at a very high level with boards, with committees, with executives. And so again, it wasn't intentional about becoming a supplier, but through a few changes I was exploring in my life and then this opportunity, it just absolutely made sense. And so far it's been fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. And it seems like, right, like you're still able to flex those association support, member impact kind of things, but now being able to do it for a large variety, right, of associations. So it's almost sounds like to me, right, like that impact is actually broader than if you were just working for a singular association. And I think that's a neat perspective to be able to take, especially when you move to the vendor side, right? And I think you also then get to bring that perspective with you. Like I've been in your shoes. I know what that means. I know what it's like, right? And I think that is a stronger consultant for sure when we have stuff like that.
Let's hope so.
Well, we have you here to talk about your STAR Award that you received at the end of 2021. So first, congratulations on that.
Thank
you were
you.
the individual supplier of the year. So I'm curious, can you just share with me, obviously there was a nomination process, there was an application, right? So some things that have likely been submitted on your behalf, but I'm curious, in your own words, if you can share what you think you did that helped you to receive that award this year.
Sure. Well, first of all, it was a complete surprise. Was not expecting that. And I'm familiar with how one goes about nominating for Star Wars. I'm familiar with, who is involved in the decision making. But the thing is, I actually have no idea who nominated me to this day. Okay. Because I was there, Talbott Talent, we had a table. So I was there, with Leah York and also, our business development director, a few other, of my close colleagues in the association community. And, I'm just like, that was great. So did any of you? And they said, it wasn't me. So even those that I was most immediately that I work with on a, regular day-to-day basis. So it was someone else. So I actually don't know.
That's exciting though.
But whoever it was, thank you. I really appreciate that.
So were you listening and you're they're describing things and you're like, oh, that's interesting. That sounds like me. Oh, wait, that's me.
That's pretty much exactly what happened. So unfortunately, I was one of those people that was looking at my phone at the moment that they started describing it. And, in my defense, it was, I have a 2-year-old at home and my husband was just kind of, he was asking me where one of his toys was. He was supposed to be asleep by this point, and I'm just like, hey, I'm kind of at something, but did you check behind the crib? Did you? And then, in the background, then I start hearing these things that are starting to resonate, and I look up and I'm just like, oh my God, I really need to pay attention right now.
This sounds familiar.
I'll text you back later, good luck finding the stuffed giraffe. And then, once it came up, I was just like, are you kidding? That's so cool.
Nice.
That was really, really cool. So,
that's great.
So I'm super honored, first of all. In terms of what I think helped me to receive that award, Well, I was pretty engaged in 2021. I was on two committees. I was on the Young Professionals Committee and the Government Affairs Committee. And then I was also part of the DEI Task Force, which they've extended out their mandate for a second year. And so I imagine that probably just that, I became pretty visible, I guess, within ISAE, not necessarily intentionally, but just through all my service. And I also attended quite a few events, and wherever possible, I would just go up to, if there was, if a committee was running it, I might go to some of the committee and be like, hey, do you need some help? Like at the ICON in July, for example. I mean, there was one session that was being led by the DEI task force, which I was on, but then I said like, hey, if we're doing roundtables, do you need me to take some notes? Do you need me to, help come up with some ideas? And then we're going up to the staff and just saying, hey guys, do you need anything? And so, and again, none of that was because I was like, oh, I'm going to get an award this year. That was not even what I was thinking. But I think it was a combination of, in those like events situations, I was just so happy to be out and in public and at events in person and seeing the people that, I've connected with, because I want to say ICON was my first in-person event since the pandemic had happened, And so as we just kept doing that, I'm just so happy to be here, folks. What can I do to just talk to more people? So it was selfish, but then yeah, I imagine it was just being part of those committees, trying to add value wherever I could or I felt I was comfortable to, and yeah, I guess that would be it. And again, whoever nominated me, I would love to know what it was that made you, you had me in mind for that.
Yeah, I think it's great to see involved suppliers. I think it's not always the case, right? I think a lot of the times we've paid our sponsorship or we've done whatever we need to, and that's great. Obviously, we need that, so I don't want to downplay that by any means. But I think it's really great when you can bring other perspectives, other success metrics, other things right to the table as a supplier, because I think it shows from an association professional side, right, that you're engaged in the success of the industry, and I think that that's really important. So why? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, if I could, I will say though, it's like I don't really think of myself in terms of like, the supplier or what have you. And I do know though, because I am kind of in this category with an ISAE, I have had the chance to meet with a lot of other suppliers and vendors. And like me, there's a lot of CAEs that work in that environment. And so, I think like, and I won't speak for anyone else, but for me is I see myself as an association professional. This is my industry. And so whether I am with an AMC or with an association or I'm on the supplier side, for me, I'm investing, like you said, in the profession and in the community because it's what I do and it's what I care about.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, right? Again, we're all on the same team. We all need the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I think when we think about a lot of vendors, right, if the association role wasn't here, they may not exist as a solution, at least, right? The business may still be there, but it would be for a different reason. And I think that's important for all of us to remember.
Sure.
So for you, and you kind of just hit on this a little bit, right? So I'm not going to say as a supplier anymore, but just why for you, why is it important for you to be engaged in the association? Like, why is that so important? How does it help you personally? And how does it help the association as a whole?
Yeah, so I guess I'll say on the professional side is, and again, working in the association world, I think it's kind of a given. Okay, you work with associations, you kind of have to be part of the association for the association people. It would be, it would almost like, let's just say, if I was looking for a consultant who in associations and they weren't a part of an association, I'd probably question if they were the right person, but so there's a professional side and there's the professional benefits. Like I read the emails that are coming from ISAE and ASAE. I am regularly getting, signing up for the webinars. I'm getting a lot of education. Again, because I work with a lot of different clients, having this understanding of best practices, both that which is perhaps a little bit more just it's new and theoretical and we're reading about it, but also that which is kind of more proven, and then being able to see how that can actually work for our clients. And then of course, networking. I mentioned earlier, like I wouldn't have my current position had I not met Leah through an ISAE event. So there's a lot of benefits there. But I'm going to get real with you for a moment. The real reason that I'm a part of ISAE is because I just really like it. I am not originally from Indianapolis. I did move here in 2017. But, like a lot of, I mean, it's kind of hard to make friends as an adult. There comes a certain point, and then at one point, I started having a family, but ISAE helps me feel more connected to the Indianapolis community. I really like working in this industry, not just because of my passion for associations as institutions, but I have found that association folks tend to be, pretty like-minded, or at least, we tend to like some of the same things and we think the same way. And I mean, the membership at ISAE, for lack of a better word, is just really cool. I mean, we really have a good time when we're together. I've never had anything less than a super interesting conversation and genuine, engagement. And especially in this time coming out of the pandemic, ISAE has been kind of helping me to feel like it's not just me in my home with my family. Even if it is just Zoom meetings, it's helped me to feel connected with others, again, in my profession and in my community. And so even approaching, I said I was on 3 committees last year. Well, when I approached it, it had nothing to do with my career or my profession. I went into it with, I need human connection, and I really like and care about these issues. So I'm going to do this for me. And I mean, maybe it sounds a little selfish, but I mean, it sounds like at the end of the day, ISAE benefited from it. And so yeah, I mean, I've been part of the young professional group for a few years now. I absolutely love it. So there's no questions me part of that. I started out my career doing government relations advocacy with all those associations in Africa. And so I'm like, but I've never worked on it at the state level. And I actually don't know much about how, government in the state of Indiana works in terms of how they engage with associations and nonprofits. So I really want to be part of that. And then DEI, I really care about it. So I went into it for the personal reasons. And, it sounds like there are others that benefit from it, which is great. But I encourage others to be a little bit selfish about it, because I think that it lends itself to a more fulfilling and satisfying experience. Not that you shouldn't do it because, if professionally it's expected, then you should totally do it. But you get more warm and fuzzies when you do it for the personal reasons.
Yeah, and I don't think it's selfish at all, right? I mean, I think, as you mentioned, right, like there's a reason why associations exist, and associations exist to bring like-minded people together to further their industry, their profession, or whatever else the association is there to support, right? And so I think if we flip this on its head, right, not for the association for associations, if we think about this for our own members, I think I view that as maybe that's why some of my volunteers are so engaged, right? Sometimes there's volunteers that I'm sure we all work with sometimes that we're like, ooh, you're a lot of work to manage. But I think that means those are the people as well, right, who are so invested in the success of the association, not necessarily from a professional standpoint, though, this is one of my personal outlets. This is the thing I really care about. And if that means that the way I care about it is through creating some new things for the association, then great, right? Yeah. But I gain a lot of value out of engaging with the individuals who are part of my association. And so I think if we can take that to heart and remember that for ourselves as we work with volunteers, I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of the things that you've impacted, what are some of the things you've done as you've been a part of ISAE that you've just really, really appreciated, or you've really enjoyed the opportunity to be a part of?
Yeah. Well, I probably have to mention the Young Professionals Committee again. Especially as I'm getting closer and closer to no longer being technically considered a young professional, I've really leaned into and recognized more the importance of young professionals. Because it's one thing when you're like starting out your career and people talk about like, the young, they're the next generation. Well, I feel like when you're in it, you don't fully appreciate that. You're just kind of thinking like, oh, no, I'm doing my own thing and I'm going my own way. And sure, I'm the future. That sounds great. But then as you start to go through your career and you're seeing the others coming in behind you, I think that's when the impact of like what that you are the future really means starts to hit. And then it's like, no, I really need to be engaged, not just for myself, but as part of that sustainability. Like, I want there to be some legacy to what I'm doing now. I want these associations to be around when I'm no longer here. And also there are some really great opportunities for meaningful careers in this. I'm not going to paint a broad brush and be like, every association is perfect and it's great and you should go work there. Because as we know, that's not the case. In fact, I don't know. Those who do consulting services like me probably wouldn't have a job if they were all perfect and hunky-dory and rainbows and what have you. But I just know how much it's meant to me. And I also look back and say, if I had this, whether it be a bit of mentorship, or if I had a bit more direction, or even just a place where I could go and talk to people who weren't, my coworkers, but got what I was saying, I'm like, how great would that have been? I mean, obviously I did okay, but, just kind of paying it forward to the next one. So it's been very meaningful and we do great stuff, but also everyone on the YP committee, again, I keep using this term, is just, they're so cool. I look forward to our monthly meetings. I look forward to our banter. I look forward to us getting down to business and actually saying, this is what we plan to accomplish and we're going to accomplish it. And here's how. And you know what? We do every year. So it's just, I've really enjoyed that. There's probably others, but I'll stop there.
No, I think that's a key one for sure. And I think it's a newer group in the association. And I think it's done very well to create its mark, right? To showcase what it can do. And I think the goal, hopefully, of that group, right, has been to showcase that this is a career. It's not just a job. And I think we're trying to pave that path for younger individuals, that this is a place where you can make a long lasting impact. And I think that group has really done some good work there. So we thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you. I am a little bummed that I'm not on it this year, but I'm not on it for good reason. I'm serving the society in other ways. So
that's right. You're a board member now.
I am the supplier member. So it's now it's exciting too. I'm really stoked about that.
Yeah. Brings that YP perspective, I think, to the table there for sure. So how would you recommend that other people get engaged in ISAE or just the association industry as a whole?
Yeah, so with ISAE, if I'm pulling from my own experience, I'd say think selfishly, for sure. And what I mean by that is just think about, it's all about connecting your passions with what the needs of the association are. Like when I'm working with, our boards, for example, and one of the things I hear all the time, even though we don't necessarily do like volunteered program development or anything, but I hear from our boards all the time, which is, well, we don't, not enough people are engaged and it's always the same few people. And how do we do it? And, what is kind of the very basic approach to that is like, well, you need to create a meaningful experience for your members. And what is it that what are your needs? And then what is it that they want or are interested in? And then how do you create those opportunities to match those? So ISAE does offer quite a few different types of opportunities. So I think it's just a matter of, maybe learning a little bit more, just reaching out to some of my experience. Sorry, I'm not making more work for you guys, but my experience has always been like, I could just kind of reach out to someone and be like, hey, Millie, or, hey, Mark, previously Stu, what do you think about this? And you guys have been great about that. So use this as an opportunity to tap into something that you're really interested in or passionate about, but it's not something that you have to do for work. I think if you come at it from that approach, then one, it's a whole lot less stressful feeling. And two, you might actually be able to enjoy it. So come at it from a goal for getting joy. But how to get more involved in the association world, that's a harder one. If you started out like me, who didn't have any idea what associations were until all of a sudden you're working with them in literally, halfway around the world, I think the best way is to join one. A very easy path, I think, for most people is to find a professional association. Depending upon what you do, it could be like maybe a trade association, but it doesn't even necessarily mean you have to become a member, but, associations are just such an amazing resource for education and networking. So maybe it's, I'm someone I'm like, hey, I feel like I really need to improve my skills on XYZ. Well, it doesn't matter if it's being hosted by a technical institute or, a third party organization or university. If an association is hosting it, then you should absolutely do that. And I think maybe it's through exposure to non-members and non-traditional ways that can at least help people to better understand that it's like, oh, this is yet another interesting resource that can help me as a person and potentially help, those within, my network or within my own ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be just the association for associations, right? Whatever that profession
Oh,
looks
yeah.
like, whatever that interest is, right? There's lots of ways, I think, to get involved, to see, what you can gain and learn. And I really like, your kind of key point here, which is be selfish. I think that's okay, right? I think we always think of this like selfishness, right, as like a negative term, but I think in this
Mhm.
realm, it's what can I gain from my involvement that allows me to grow, whether that's personally or professionally, right? And I
Mhm.
think that is important as you think about how you get involved, because to your point, right, that makes a meaningful experience for you, and that makes it a much more rich opportunity for you to participate in that.
Yeah. And, there's been a lot of talk, especially since the pandemic, and a lot more open conversations about the importance of mental health. The term that is going around a lot is this idea of self-care. Well, I think that, self-care can have a lot of like images or connotations with it, where it's, oh, well, it's getting a massage. Well, I mean, yeah, that's great. I love getting massages, or it's, taking a bubble bath, or maybe it's, doing some yoga or something. But for me, part of my self-care in 2021 as an extrovert that was struggling during the pandemic was just to try to find pockets of opportunity to connect with people who I felt got me and I got them. And that's what some of this committee work did. So for me, that was a form of self-care. But again, that's just how I approached it. Not everyone's going to approach it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. So as we wrap up today, I'm curious, we're starting to ask this question to a lot of folks, but what's one piece of advice you would provide to association professionals as they start or continue their career journey? No pressure.
Yeah. And, that's only a hard one just because, I said, didn't plan to get into associations. And like you said, a lot of the benefit for, professional programming is just helping to make people realize that it is a career, so, I mean, just building that awareness can be challenging. But, for those that are kind of starting, I would say, first and foremost, take advantage of every single possible educational resource you can. For me, the real turning point, and I know this isn't available for everyone, but the real turning point for me in terms of like, I was going from like, oh, I work with these groups to I want to be in this environment professionally, was attending IOM. Because it was just the greatest. I mean, it's 4 weeks over 4 years, or 1 week a year for 4 years, 4 weeks total. But it was essentially the greatest crash course in everything about the institutions of nonprofits, associations, and chambers of commerce. But that experience was transformational. And I feel that if there were others that could like, hey, I'm kind of interested in this field. I don't quite know what it means in terms of career. I'm not really sure what it means in terms of skill sets. There's a lot of educational resources out there available to you from associations. Dive in. And I guarantee you're going to find something that interests you, because I mean, for IOM, it was more geared towards current or aspiring executives. And I was definitely on the aspiring side of that at the time. But, there's a lot of folks that came out of this and said that, like, wow, I really love the idea of membership. I like membership development. I like engaging volunteers. This is what I like to do. Lots of folks came out of it were, in my realm, that's like, wow, the government relations piece and advocacy and lobbying, that's super cool. And, so I think there's a lot of different avenues and technical skills pathways, if you will, within associations. But yeah, eat it all up. And there's a lot of free educational resources out there too. So just take in as much as you can and then filter out what maybe doesn't serve you, but lean into what really does pique your interest. And if you do that, there is a pathway for you. You might end up creating your own, like a lot of us have, but there's absolutely a pathway for you.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Well, Erica, thank you for joining us today. This has been a great conversation. I know I always personally get a lot of these. I know our listeners do as well. If folks wanted to connect with you, they wanted to chat with you more on their own, how can they find you on the internet?
Sure. So I would say check me out on LinkedIn. It's just search by my name, Erica Poff, ERICA POFF. You can also go ahead, feel free to email me. It's Erica at talbottalent.com. It's one word, 3 T's in the middle, TALBOTTALENT. Always got to throw that in there because you always miss 1 or 2 T's in doing that. And yeah, I think, email or LinkedIn are really the best ways to reach me. And I'm happy to talk to anyone if they're new in the career, especially, young professionals, or you're just looking for someone to connect with, because I talked a lot about that need for my personal needs for connections. I'm here for you.
Yeah. Grab that coffee with Erica. She is a great person to speak with. And fun tidbit, you probably don't even remember this. You did a CAE thing, right? I think after you moved back to Indianapolis, and that was one of my first things I went to as a YP.
Mm-hmm.
And I now hold the CAE as well. So it was it's a fun little kind of full circle moment to speak with you today, just about your impact on associations.
Wow, that was actually, I think, my first formal ISAE event too, because I was pretty new here, and I was also talking at it, but that's so awesome, and I love that. And by the ISAE also is great in terms of the track record for, helping people that aspire to the CAE to actually get it. So that's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of You Should Hear This. If you have any questions you'd like answered or future topics you'd like us to explore, please send us an email at info@isae.org.